I've been wearing 4 sleep trackers simultaneously for months, and after comparing all of them to a medical-grade sleep study, I found out that most of them were lying to me about the one thing I cared about most. So I worked with a professional sleep doctor who hooked me up to the gold standard medical sleep study, and I just got diagnosed with sleep apnea. And none of my $300 to $3,000 sleep trackers actually caught it. So I did something a little excessive. I wore an Oura Ring, an Apple Watch, a Whoop, and used an 8-sleep cover, all while hooked up to a medical grade polysomnograph system. And I know the real question everyone has is this: out of all the consumer sleep trackers, which one is actually the best? Stay to the end and I'll walk you through how I choose one and what I actually personally use now. And to make this as fair as possible, I tested all 4 of these sleep trackers side by side under the same exact conditions. Oh, and by the way, if you want to check out any of the devices that I'm covering in this video, I've linked all of them down below with discount codes. Using any of those links costs you nothing, and for some brands it even saves you money, and it directly supports the channel, so thank you. All right, so before we get into the data, let's break down what we're actually comparing. And to be clear, this is strictly a sleep tracking comparison. When it comes to fitness tracking or other components, completely different conversation. Right now, I'm focused on just one question: which device is best for sleep? First up is the Oura Ring, specifically the Oura Ring Gen 4. And from a comfort standpoint, this is probably the easiest device to wear. It's just a ring over your finger, ideally your index or middle finger, and once it's on, you forget that it's even there. The app experience is also excellent. Oura recently updated the app, and while it does take a few more taps than before, it's still very polished and very intuitive. Next up is the Apple Watch. This is the bulkiest of the devices that I tested, and it took me perhaps the longest to get used to sleeping with. At least initially, it was somewhat uncomfortable wearing it on my wrist. And all of the sleep data lives inside the Apple Health app. Apple has made improvements over time, things like sleep score and so on, but it's still not optimized specifically for sleep, and Oura is a better experience in my opinion. And the experience also feels somewhat disjointed. So you have to jump between different sections to see your sleep and then your heart rate and then your HRV. Next is Whoop. It is definitely less bulky than the Apple Watch, but comfort depends on how you wear it. And personally, I ran into accuracy issues when I was wearing it just on my wrist, especially during movement. To get reliable heart rate data, I had to wear it on my bicep, which meant I had to wear it pretty tight, which wasn't my favorite, kind of like that. Just long term, it's not the most comfortable in my opinion, although it's less bulky than the Apple Watch at least. And the app itself is also solid, gives you core metrics, sleep duration, heart rate, and HRV, but it doesn't actually show you estimated sleep stages, unlike the other apps. And finally, there's 8Sleep. This one is quite different because you don't wear anything, it's just a mattress cover, and it has a bedside hub off on the side. So from a comfort standpoint, this is easily the best because you're just sleeping on your bed, you're not wearing anything. And also beyond tracking, it has real functionality because it has active cooling and heating, which can be a game changer if temperature notably affects your sleep. Like I will oftentimes feel hot when falling asleep and then cool when, later in the night, and this can actually counteract that. The obvious downside is portability. So if you travel a lot, this of course stays at home. So how do we actually know which one is telling the truth? For that, we need a gold standard. And to understand what a real sleep study is and what it's measuring and how it's different from an Oura Ring, an Apple Watch, and so on, we need to talk to an expert. To help make sense of all this, let me call Dr. Sahil Chopra, a triple board certified Harvard-trained sleep physician. Hey Sahil, for people who've only ever seen sleep data from a watch or from a ring, can you explain what a PSG actually is and what it's designed to measure?
A polysomnography, or PSG, is a test that measures one's physiology during sleep. It measures more than 10 different channels or data points continuously while the person is sleeping. Kevin, you used an Onera home sleep testing system as the gold standard because it's FDA cleared and it's easy to use in the comfort of your own home. PSGs measure sleep through monitoring the central nervous system, tracking brain waves, along with breathing patterns and heart rate and body position, muscle tone, and body movements. Consumer-grade wearables, on the other hand, infer sleep through characteristics of the autonomic nervous system, particularly the heart rate, breathing, and movement.
So instead of inferring sleep from proxies like heart rate and movement, this test is actually measuring what's happening in your body during sleep. This was the gold standard part of the experiment. I used the Onera home sleep testing system, which is a medical grade sleep study you can do at home. And I'm not gonna lie, when you first see the setup, it looks intense, There are small sensors that stick to your face, your chest, abdomen, and leg, plus a nasal cannula that sits under your nose to track breathing. And being honest, that first night, not ideal. Sleeping with something in your nose and sensors all over your body does take some getting used to, and if I rolled on my side, I would actually feel the leg sensor, and it just made it harder for me to fully relax and fall asleep the way that I normally would. Okay, so one really important thing to know is skin prep matters, and I followed the very simple skin prep tips. You clean your skin with alcohol or an abrasive gel so that the sensor stays on all night and you don't lose any data. But in my case, that was actually a problem. The first night, I cleaned my skin with the included swab, I put the sensor on, and when I removed them in the morning, it literally ripped off the top layer of my skin.
So earlier this morning, I took off the sleep thing, the right side, because it wasn't the double-sided tape came off. I just had to use my own medical tape, and you can see where the medical tape was sticking. But then this is where it actually stuck to me, and clearly my skin is not happy. It actually was really stinging in the shower.
Now, keep in mind, the issues that I had with my skin, while significant and painful and aesthetically not ideal, they're not typical. I do have more sensitive skin than average, and both Dr. Chopra and the representatives from Onera, they both mentioned that most people have no issues. What I'm experiencing is not the norm at all. So the second night, I tried skipping the alcohol. I just applied the sensors directly because the skin already has natural oils. Same result. It still pulled off my skin. Now keep in mind, your mileage may vary. This is just based on my skin, right? I think for a lot of other people, they're not gonna have the same issue that I did, but I just wanna be transparent with you guys. By the third night, I finally figured it out, which is applying a small amount of moisturizer on my chest before putting on the sensors. By the way, the skin issue was only on my chest, not on my face or my legs or my abdomen, just on my chest. But even with the moisturizer, they stayed on all night and they came off without tearing my skin. So if you have sensitive skin like I do, take note. You want the sensors secure enough that they collect data and they don't fall off, but not so aggressive that they injure your skin when you try to remove them. All right, that side note aside, once you know what to expect, your body adapts pretty quickly. And once you're done, you just place everything back in the packaging, you drop it off at FedEx, very painless, no lab, no overnight stay, no hassle. You're sleeping in your own bed, realistic sleeping conditions rather than going someplace else. So while it isn't quite as comfortable as wearing a ring or a watch, this is the trade-off that's necessary to get real medical grade data on how you're actually sleeping. When I look at my sleep study results or pull up the app on my Aura, Apple Watch, or any other sleep tracker, things are broken down into different stages: light, deep, REM. What do those stages actually mean, and what should a healthy night of sleep look like?
Broadly speaking, sleep studies show wake, REM, or dream sleep, and non-REM sleep. Non-REM sleep is broken into 3 stages: 1, 2, and 3. Stage 1 and 2 are often bundled together as light sleep, and stage 3 is considered deep or slow wave sleep. Stage 1 is the lightest stage of sleep. It's the transition from being awake to starting to doze off. It should account for less than 5% of the total sleep time. Stage 2 is a deeper form of sleep. Brainwaves slow down and you see K complexes and sleep spindles on EEG. This should account for about 50% of the total sleep time. Stage 3 is perhaps the most important, deepest stage of sleep. It's considered restorative sleep, characterized by high amplitude delta waves, and where physical recovery happens. Growth hormone, tissue repair, and immune protection. This should account for about 25% of the total sleep time. REM is dream sleep, and although the body is paralyzed, the brain is metabolically very active. This should account for about 25% of the total sleep time.
And they say the body is paralyzed during REM because it would be dangerous to act out your dreams while in bed, right?
Absolutely. So we cycle through these different stages during the night, each lasting about 90 to 110 minutes. In the first half of the night, there's more deep sleep, or stage 3, and in the latter half of the night, there's more REM.
So when you looked at my results, you found something none of my wearables caught: mild positional sleep apnea.
That's right. You had mild positional obstructive sleep apnea, which was worse in REM sleep. The other thing we discovered was grinding of your teeth during sleep. This is also known as bruxism. This can be seen in folks that have suboptimal breathing during sleep, particularly sleep apnea. And lastly, we observed a reduction in the total sleep time and deep sleep.
So just to make sure I'm understanding, Overall, I look normal on paper, but in REM on my back, it's actually a totally different story. That's why it counts as positional sleep apnea. Why didn't any of my wearables catch this?
The most common reason for wearables to miss this is simply that they're not designed to look for mild apnea. They don't measure breathing with a high enough sampling rate. When you did the Onera study, I was able to see the nature of every breath you took and identify exactly when there was a reduction in airflow, during what stage of sleep. Wearables use an average across time and recognize a pattern and give you an overview rather than the details.
Is mild sleep apnea concerning?
Even mild sleep apnea isn't something to ignore. It fragments your sleep, increases cardiovascular risk, and in certain people, it can contribute to hypertension, heart disease, and stroke. In this situation, I think it contributes to a reduction in deep sleep and a shorter total sleep time.
Now, aside from avoiding sleeping on my back, is there anything else I can do to reduce the risk of sleep apnea and improve my breathing? It sounds like I'm not so severe as to need a CPAP device, thankfully.
Great point. Things we should try is to combine the use of nasal strips that stent open your airway with nasal rinses that keep the sinuses clean. Secondly, mouth tape to keep the mouth closed, along with myofunctional therapy to strengthen the tongue. Myofunctional therapy is like physical therapy for the tongue and the upper airway.
Tell me more about teeth grinding, or bruxism, as they call it.
Bruxism is when you grind or clench your teeth during sleep, often without realizing it. And it's not just a dental issue, it's closely linked to sleep disruption, especially sleep apnea. During apneic episodes, you briefly wake up to open up your airway, and those mini awakenings can trigger your jaw muscles to clench and grind. That's why bruxism often shows up right after a breathing event.
Okay, so the wearables missed the apnea and the bruxism, but looking at the data side by side, what did they get right? Because this is where I think people get confused. Just because a device is missing something important doesn't mean it's useless.
Your sleep time was reduced, and the wearables captured this quite accurately. Aura was within 1 to 2%, and Apple Watch within 4%. All the devices you tested, Apple Watch, Aura Ring, 8 Sleep, Whoop, were excellent at heart rate. We're talking 1 beat per minute of the Onera gold standard. This is genuinely useful data. You can track resting heart rate trends, see if you're overtraining, and even detect if you're getting sick before any symptoms appear.
After the first couple of nights, you mentioned that my sleep and wake times are too inconsistent and it's compromising my sleep quality. Tell me about what you saw in those initial sleep studies and how things changed after I followed a consistent sleep-wake time for 10 nights prior to that third night of testing. Because it was quite apparent that I fell asleep much faster, or in other words, my sleep latency reduced with regularity in sleep and wake time. But what other changes did you see?
Your sleep times and wake times varied by more than a couple of hours most nights. That inconsistency disrupts sleep stages. Deep sleep happens earlier in the night and REM later. Going to bed late cuts into the deep sleep, and waking up early cuts into REM. Ideally, variation should be under an hour. The key takeaway: consistency matters. Better sleep is a result of a stable circadian rhythm. After just 10 nights of a consistent sleep schedule, your circadian system stabilized and sleep latency improved. Wearables can track this.
Now, let's talk about where things get messy. When we compare deep sleep numbers from Aura, Apple Watch 8 Sleep, and Whoop to what Onera showed, they're all over the place. What's going on?
Without EEG, wearables struggle to accurately measure sleep stages. They rely on proxies like heart rate, HRV, and movement to infer sleep stages. It's like diagnosing a fracture by watching how someone is walking. You might guess correctly, but you're not really seeing the problem. What you're seeing is algorithmic bias. These models are trained and validated against sleep studies in healthy people under controlled conditions. Real-world sleep, especially in people with a sleep disorder, often looks very different.
One interesting finding: Apple Watch was the only device that underestimated deep sleep while everyone else overestimated. Why do you think that is?
This likely reflects a design priority. Apple uses a more conservative algorithm requiring stronger evidence before labeling deep sleep. Their models are validated in both healthy sleepers and those with sleep disorders. And the Apple Watch even includes a sleep apnea detection feature with a very high specificity.
While it's a nice perk that the Apple Watch has sleep apnea detection, it's not going to be as sensitive as a real PSG like what I did with Onera. That's why my Apple Watch has never detected sleep apnea.
The Apple Watch is good at detecting moderate to severe sleep apnea, but mild or positional sleep apnea can be missed. Consumer wearables are designed to be specific, good at flagging real problems rather than overly sensitive and triggering false positives.
Okay, so if someone's watching this with an Oura Ring or an Apple Watch and feels betrayed, what should they actually do with their device? Since my earliest YouTube content, 2018, right, I've always told viewers with sleep wearables that I personally recommend focusing on total sleep time, heart rate, and HRV, and to not overly focus on sleep stages or other metrics, since these aren't as accurate as we've discovered. Is that still true, or do you think things have changed?
I agree with your take. Here's how I guide patients. 1. Track total sleep time. Ignore the stages. This is where wearables are the most accurate. Aim for a consistent 7 to 9 hours. Averaging 6 is a red flag. If I had to obsess over one metric, it's the total sleep time. 2. Track consistency. The biggest value of a wearable is enforcing bedtime. After just 10 nights of consistency, your sleep latency improved. That's circadian biology at work. 3. Watch resting heart rate. It's a powerful signal for recovery, stress, overtraining, and identifying early illness. A rising trend means something is off. 4. Follow trends, not nights. Look at weekly averages. Absolute numbers may be wrong, but the direction matters, especially when testing different interventions.
So when should someone actually get a medical sleep study like Onera, and what are the red flags?
Consider a sleep study if your partner reports loud snoring or irregular pauses in breathing, you're feeling tired despite 7 to 8 hours of sleep, you've had poor sleep quality consistently for 2 to 3 months, or you have conditions linked to sleep apnea such as hypertension, arrhythmias, increased risk of stroke, or even things like dementia. Home sleep tests like the Onera system are now widely available and much more convenient than doing an in-lab study.
Up to this point, we've been talking data. Now, let me make this practical. After looking at my results with Dr. Chopra, here's what I personally changed. First, nasal breathing. I started using nasal strips consistently. It's simple, but it made a noticeable difference. The biggest change, though, was sleep timing. Once I committed to a consistent bedtime, my sleep latency dropped from about 66 minutes to 8 minutes. That's massive. I also prioritized morning light. As soon as I wake up, I try to get bright light exposure, ideally sunlight, and if that's not possible, it's winter and so on, I'll use a light box instead. And finally, I fixed my wind down routine. I was already avoiding blue light, screen dimmed, night mode on, even wearing blue light blocking glasses, and also dimming all my lights with my smart lights to be a nice calming dull red rather than being this really bright white. That still wasn't the real issue, because if you're answering emails at 10:30 p.m., even with all that in place, your brain is still in problem-solving mode. The issue was cognitive activation, not light. So now I aim to put a hard stop on stimulating work between 60 and 90 minutes before my bedtime, and switching to lower stakes activities like reading fiction, listening to music, doing some stretching or guided meditations in bed. That's what I'm doing instead. I've also been experimenting with HRV biofeedback over the last few years, and it's a way to improve your parasympathetic balance and train your nervous system to down-regulate more efficiently. The goal isn't perfection, it's training, and it works hand in hand with meditation. And finally, temperature. Your core body temperature needs to drop to fall asleep. I'll often take a warm shower, then use the cooling feature on my 8 Sleep to help that process along.
I agree with all of those. To build on that, specifically for positional sleep apnea, because your sleep apnea occurs primarily when you're on your back, the simplest and highest yield intervention is to avoid back sleeping. Positional therapy devices can be very effective for this. We also want to prioritize nasal breathing. Nasal strips can help, but it's worth going a step further, considering structural factors like a deviated nasal septum or turbinate hypertrophy. In some cases, a nasal dilator or better allergy control can make a meaningful difference.
Last question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone obsessing over their sleep tracker score every morning, what would it be?
Think of your sleep tracker like a bathroom scale. It's great at trends, not diagnosing a problem. It can tell you sleep duration and heart rate patterns, but not true sleep quality. Just like a scale can't tell you body composition. If you're struggling with sleep, you need better tools. Real problems require real diagnostics, like a sleep study.
So after doing the sleep study and comparing everything side by side with the wearables, here's how I think about it. Again, I've been saying this back since 2018 when I first started making this content, and I'll say it again now, which is that sleep trackers are not very good at telling you your actual sleep stages. Deep sleep versus REM versus light sleep, they simply don't measure it that reliably, even today, all these years later. And Dr. Chopra agrees with this. What I tell people to focus on instead are 4 things: total sleep time, sleep consistency, resting heart rate, and HRV. I'll admit, consistency is something I probably didn't emphasize enough in the past, but after this, I focus on it a lot more. And the important point here is that you can get those 4 metrics from any of these devices. If you want the most accurate overall, I'd say the Apple Watch and the Oura Ring are probably the best. But before I give my final analysis on which wearables I prefer and will continue using, if someone out there is watching this video and is concerned about their sleep or the reliability of their tracker, what can they do? Access accurate and reliable sleep data with Empower Sleep, and you can actually save $100 by using the link in the description. When it comes to wearables, the more important question is what form factor you prefer. The A-Sleep, for example, is great if you care about mattress cooling and heating, and it does track your sleep, but I don't really use it for sleep tracking. I use it for temperature control, and the sleep data is just an added bonus that honestly I don't really look at much because my Oura and Apple Watch are more reliable. The downside is that you're obviously not traveling with it. Whoop doesn't show you sleep stages, which again doesn't really matter, and I don't really emphasize that you focus on that anyways, but it still gives you those core metrics that I think do matter. For me, comfort was my issue. I had accuracy problems when I wore it on my wrist, although on the wrist it is more comfortable, and on the bicep it's more accurate, but then I compromise on the comfort.
Whoop is worn on the shirt, and notice this, maybe from a bike ride where it's like up against my skin, tight.
So after all this, here's what I personally do. I'm continuing to use the Apple Watch and the Oura Ring. I use both every single night, and I don't want to wear a bunch of devices when I sleep, and this setup works for me, just having 2. The Apple Watch is surprisingly accurate, and I use it all day when I'm awake as well. I use it as my alarm and for fitness and so on. It has a lot of added functionality. And you may be asking, well, why use 2? Well, first, there's redundancy. Sometimes one device will fail and just not track sleep for whatever reason. Sometimes the heart rate doesn't appear or sync properly. Sometimes an update breaks things. So having 2 means that I'm not blind if any one has issues. And secondly, they can catch different things. So there have been times where one device picked up early signs that I was getting sick and the other didn't. I also like seeing how 2 different systems interpret the same night of sleep instead of trusting just one single score. In terms of accuracy, these are the 2 that I do trust the most. The Apple Watch is surprisingly accurate. I mean, wrist devices are not supposed to be accurate, but I don't know what wizardry Apple pulled off. I wear it all day. I use it for fitness. It has a lot of added functionality beyond just sleep. And the Oura Ring, it's all about comfort. It's just a ring, you forget it's there, and it's easy to travel with, though it's not great as an activity tracker. I've talked about that before in previous videos. So if you're choosing a sleep tracker, any of these can work. Just focus on total sleep time, consistency, resting heart rate, and HRV, and pick the device that you'll actually wear every night. I've linked my full comparison videos right up here. And last thing, if you're planning to buy any of these sleep trackers, I'd really appreciate it if you use the links in the description. They don't cost you anything extra, they actually save you money, and they help support the channel so we can keep doing deep dives like this.